10 years of the law of attraction summarized in 20 minutes. 10 years ago, I sat down with my first book on the law of attraction with the same expectation as someone opening a map to find a treasure. The promise was clear: quick results, instant transformation, as if it were enough to think correctly for life to reorganize itself around me. And for a while, I believed it would be like that the road to the life I wanted would be straight, short, and illuminated. But I soon discovered that most who begin this journey end up frustrated, and that this frustration comes not because the law of attraction doesn't work, but because the understanding of it is often born distorted. The initial fascination led me to test methods, phrases, rituals, like someone trying to decipher a secret code. But deep down, what I was seeking was not just to manifest things. It was to feel that I had the power to create. It was to believe that my life was not at the mercy of chance. Bruce Lipton showed me, with epigenetics, that our beliefs function like keys that turn on or off potentials within us. Not just genetic potentials, but behavioral and emotional ones. It was like realizing I carried a silent power station, capable of turning on or off internal lights that determined the course of my story. Joe Dispenza added another layer to this understanding. He made me see that the electromagnetic field we emanate, which converses with the field around us, is shaped by a constant dance between the heart and the brain, and that this dance responds not just to what we think, but to what we feel on a recurring basis. It was as if each emotion were a color I threw into this field, and the predominant tone dictated the scenery I attracted back. I spent a decade searching for the secret route, until I realized that the map I was using was distorted by my own perceptions. I saw shortcuts where there were only detours, insisted on long paths when the truth was simple, and little by little, I understood that it wasn't about finding a perfect method, but about adjusting the way I saw and lived each step. Today, what I want to share is no longer a set of techniques, but a synthesis. An honest and direct summary of what I discovered over years of trial and error. What worked, what proved to be just an illusion, and above all, what repeated itself as truth, even when everything else seemed to make no sense. Not to shorten the path artificially, but to illuminate what, amidst so much noise, remains essential. Because if I could condense a decade into a single gift, it would be this: clarity, the myth of isolated positive thinking. For a long time, I believed that maintaining positive thoughts would be enough to transform my life. I repeated motivational phrases, smiled at the mirror, forced myself to see the good side of everything, and for a brief moment, it seemed to work. But I soon realized that light was easily extinguished. All it took was a difficult day, a tough conversation, or a painful memory, and all the positivism evaporated. It was then that I realized the problem wasn't with positive thinking itself, but with the way it was used. Like a layer of golden paint over a wall full of internal cracks. The brain and body do not respond only to what we tell ourselves. They respond to what we feel repeatedly, to the emotional pattern we carry. We can say, "I am happy" 1,000 times a day, but if the predominant emotion is fear, sadness, or anxiety, it is this frequency that will be recorded in our internal and external field. Positive thinking, when disconnected from coherent emotion, is like planting seeds on asphalt. The intention may be good, but the ground does not allow them to grow. The science of neuroplasticity and studies on emotional memory show that it is not enough to try to convince the conscious mind. The body is a living memory, trained to recognize and reproduce the most familiar emotional states. This means that if the emotion does not accompany the thought, the brain does not record the message as true, and when the mind and body are not in sync, the surrounding field receives mixed signals. I realized that, in practice, the real challenge was not to think positive, but to align that thought with an emotional state that was coherent with it. This required more than beautiful words. It required presence. It required me to observe myself throughout the day and notice, is what I am feeling now supporting or sabotaging what I think I want? This simple but profound question became like a lighthouse for me. The law of attraction does not respond to what we say mechanically, but to what we vibrate with consistency, and the vibration is not determined by isolated phrases, but by the sum of our daily emotional states. That's how I understood that isolated positive thinking is like a beautiful reflection in a turbulent lake. It might appear for a moment, but it quickly disappears if the internal waters do not calm down. The emotional addiction that keeps life in the same place. There are patterns that trap us not because they are visible, but precisely because they are so familiar that they become invisible. Joe Dispenza calls the body a living memory, an organism that daily repeats the same chemical responses, as if addicted to the emotions we experience most. If anger, anxiety, or sadness have become frequent, the body learns to seek them out like someone looking for a known dose. It's as if each cell expects that specific flavor of emotion, even if it hurts us. This emotional addiction creates a silent prison. We can change cities, jobs, relationships, but if the internal chemistry remains the same, we end up recreating similar experiences. It's like changing the scenery, but continuing to play the same background music. The plot might even seem different at first, but soon the familiar soundtrack leads us to the same outcomes. Breaking this cycle requires recognizing that we are not just victims of the external environment, but also its unconscious creators. When the mind sends a new thought, but the body insists on feeling the old pattern, there is a conflict. And in this conflict, the field around us receives mixed signals. A request for change accompanied by a vibrational signature that says, everything remains the same. I understood that small, conscious interruptions in this cycle are like changing a movie's soundtrack. A farewell scene with sad music reinforces the pain. The same scene with a soft, hopeful melody completely changes the interpretation. The environment is the same, but the experience changes because the emotion has changed. So it is with life. When we alter the emotion that accompanies our thoughts, the field begins to respond differently. These micro moments of presence, even if brief, open cracks in the emotional wall that keeps us trapped. And through these cracks, a new light begins to enter, until little by little, the body learns to like new chemistries, lighter, more coherent with the life we want to live. The emotional addiction dissolves not by force, but by the consistent repetition of new states, until they become the new normal. The importance of vibrational coherence. Over time, I realized that the law of attraction responds not just to what we desire, but to what we can sustain in coherence. Bruce Lipton explains that belief and emotion need to walk side by side to have a real impact on our biology and, consequently, on the reality we manifest. If one of them is misaligned, it's like trying to turn on a lamp with disconnected wires. There is an intention of light, but the current does not flow. Wanting something and being energetically ready to live it are very different states. We can ask for prosperity, but if the dominant emotion is fear of loss, our frequency will be shaped by that lack. We can dream of a healthy relationship, but if we carry the expectation of abandonment, the vibration we emit will be of insecurity. The field around us does not distinguish between what we imagine and what we truly feel. It responds to what we can sustain as an internal reality. I remember a time when I adjusted a small detail of my emotional routine and saw opportunities begin to arise more naturally. It wasn't something external that I changed, but an internal choice that stabilized my frequency. It was as if, suddenly, the door I had been knocking on for years began to open without effort. The change was not in the door, but in the key, and that key was the coherence between thought and emotion. The image that always comes to my mind is that of an old radio. We can turn the dial to the right station, but if the radio is off, nothing happens. The tuning only turns into sound when there is energy flowing freely. Similarly, manifestation only materializes when the vibrational tuning is on and stable. Vibrational coherence is, therefore, more than a technique. It is a state, an internal field clear of noise, where thought, emotion, and intention are in harmony. And when this happens, the universe doesn't need to decipher contradictory messages. It simply responds, like the light that turns on the exact moment the circuit is completed. The invisible law of internal time. One of the most transformative lessons of these years was understanding that manifestation does not obey the time of the clock, but internal time. And this is perhaps the hardest law to accept. We, as human beings, carry the urgency to see results, to confirm that our efforts are paying off. We want deadlines, dates, guarantees, but in the dynamics of the vibrational field, trying to control the when is like squeezing the earth in which we planted a seed too tightly. Instead of accelerating growth, we suffocate the process. Every manifestation is the fruit of an internal ripening. Before something materializes, our frequency must stabilize. Our identity must align with what we desire. When this alignment is not complete, the universe finds resistance in bringing what we ask for, not because it wants to deny us, but because the field responds to who we are, not just to what we request. I realized that swapping deadlines for milestones of presence changed the way I lived the journey. Instead of asking myself, when will it happen, I started asking, who am I being right now? This simple change dissolved the anxiety and opened up space to notice the subtle signs that something was moving. And ironically, it was precisely when I stopped watching the calendar that things began to arrive with more fluidity. The most perfect metaphor for this is that of a fruit on the tree. It only sweetens at the right time. We can try to pick it early, but the taste will be bitter and the experience incomplete. However, if we respect the time of maturation, the aroma itself tells us that the time has come. So it is with our desires. When the internal state is ready, manifestation presents itself without effort. Internal time is not passivity. It is a state of silent readiness. It is to continue nurturing the desired vibration with consistency, knowing that, like any natural cycle, the right moment cannot be forced, only allowed. And when we understand this, we stop living as anxious hunters and start living as confident gardeners. The essence of 10 years in one sentence. 1. If I could distill an entire decade of mistakes, learnings, and discoveries into a single sentence, it would be simple. The law of attraction is not about asking, but about becoming the vibrational field of what you wish to live. This realization changed everything, because it took me from the place of someone begging for something that is outside and put me in the state of someone who embodies what already is, internally, even before seeing it happen. Bruce Lipton taught me that rewriting beliefs is like planting seeds in the fertile soil of our biology. When the soil is nurtured by coherent thoughts and emotions, the seed finds the perfect conditions to grow. Joe Dispenza expanded this view, showing that emotion and intention together form the code that the quantum field responds to. It is not enough just to know what you want. You must feel as if you are already living it. This is the frequency that converses with the universe. Over the years, I realized that manifestation does not depend on grand movements, but on consistency. It's like a lighthouse. It doesn't move to search for ships. It just shines, stably and in alignment, and that light is what guides the boats to it. There is no anxiety, no rushing, just presence and firmness. This consistency is often silent. It is not about acting every day towards the desire in a forced way, but about keeping the internal vibration adjusted to it, even on days when nothing seems to change. Because in the field, everything is always in motion, even when the surface seems still. And so, looking back, I understand that the 10 years were not about learning to control the universe, but about learning to align with it. They were not about finding a secret method, but about refining what is essential and sustaining it. The greatest discovery is that it is not distance that separates you from what you desire, but how willing you are to become what you desire. When that distance disappears within you, the rest becomes inevitable.